So I don't think we have any newcomers this week, but I'm still going to go through the regular spiel here and first start with why we started the webinar in the first place. So the four of us, Vicky, Shannon, TJ, and myself, we're getting a lot of calls, emails, and texts at the beginning of COVID-19 and the onset of the shelter in place. People both in recovery and people not in recovery that were looking for resources emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, you know, how to navigate these difficult times, these challenging times. And being that we all know so many fantastic presenters like Shannon McQuaid and others, we decided we'd put together a webinar, and the intention being not so much of a conversation, but rather a presentation as a way to offer support to people. And both professionals and just people out in the community. That was a big driving force that Vicky has been trying to put together for a long time, is really offering the community all these wonderful resources that we have within our industry. So that's kind of how we came to start this webinar. A couple of housekeeping things before we get into introductions. Just want to name that we do have the poll going. I see people filling that out. So if you could fill it out by the time we end the webinar, that would be awesome, just so we know moving forward how we can best serve you. Also, if you're not able to stick around for the whole presentation today, that's totally okay, because we record them and then we'll upload them and also email you the link so that you can watch it later, and also share it with friends or loved ones who you would feel might benefit from the content. Also, we do a Q&A after the presentation. So what I really want to encourage people is to not put the questions in the chat, because it's easy for it to get drowned out. I don't want to miss any questions. So if you do have questions for Shannon or for any of the panelists, you can put them in the Q&A feature in Zoom. That way we get to everybody's questions, okay? Whew, boy, that was a lot. Okay. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy Miller. I work with TJ Woodward at Conscious Recovery and also at Embodied Recovery, which is an outpatient, both PHP and IOP in Los Gatos, California. And I'm excited to report that we just launched our mental health track. So now we can do mental health and substance abuse. So we are pumped. And if you'd like more info on that, you can always email me or call me afterwards. That being said, I'm going to go get some air. Shannon, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, it's all you.
All right. I'm Shannon Clay, and I work with Discovery Behavioral Health. And I've been in the field of substance use and addiction, addiction treatment and mental health disorder treatment for 34 years. That's why I'm old enough to have known about dialing time, if anybody was listening to us before we got started. And I love bringing resources to people for healing, any human beings for healing. And that's my part in this webinar. And I'm very glad to have Shannon McQuaid back with us today, who's a former colleague of mine at a different organization, and also a dear friend, and super grateful for all of the energy that you bring to us, Shannon. And I know you're going to bring us some good stuff today. So that's it. I'm going to pass the baton to Vicky.
All right, here we go. Vic, you ready?
Yeah, thank you again, Shannon. Like everybody else said, thanks for joining us again, back by popular demand. And Jeremy and Shannon pretty much said it all. I'm glad to have this opportunity to bring these resources to not just our colleagues, but the community. I think it's super important, and I'm glad to be part of something that helps people navigate through what can be a very difficult system to navigate through. I know I have a lot of clients when they're looking for treatment that they get very lost on the web. And I hope this brings you some information and some faces to what can be a very trying task. That's all I've got for today. Welcome, and I hope you all enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicky. TJ, you ready?
Always ready. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, everyone. So grateful to be here. And as has been said, we started this webinar really as a resource for building community, sharing resources, and bringing on great presenters like Shannon McQuaid. So incredibly grateful you're here and back with us. And we like to start each of the webinars with just a short mindfulness process. So I'm going to lead that now. I invite you for just a moment to go within. If it's appropriate for you to close your eyes, I invite you to gently close your eyes. And we begin by taking a nice deep conscious breath together. And on the exhale, simply allowing yourself to become fully present. Bringing your full attention and intention to this very moment. So we do set the intention for our time together to be open and receptive and guided by inner wisdom, knowing that every word Shannon speaks is spoken from this essential beingness, this deep awareness or spiritual essence, and we receive it with an open heart, an open mind, knowing and trusting that exactly what wants and needs to be said is said, and we receive it. What a gift that we have chosen to be here together in this moment. So with that, we just take about 15 seconds in the silence together. And then slowly beginning to bring our awareness back into this time and space, into our environment. And as it feels right for you, I invite you to gently open your eyes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, TJ. Thank you to the panelists for those wonderful intros. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Shannon McQuaid. Thank you so much for coming back. I'm super grateful and really excited for your presentation today. Of course, a little about Shannon. She has been in the field of addiction and mental health for over 25 years. The majority of this time, she has assumed roles in leadership as a clinical and executive director and has also maintained a private practice throughout. Most recently, before joining the soul surgery team as executive director, Shannon was the clinical and executive director for Promises Scottsdale for the past 10 years. Shannon is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a licensed independent substance abuse counselor. She's a certified sex addiction therapist and a certified Daring Way facilitator. She's passionate about developing treatment programming and overseeing all aspects to ensure clients are getting the treatment they deserve. Shannon, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back for a second time with all of you, and so appreciate what you're doing. I got so much out of Adriana's presentation last week. I've rewatched it twice, actually. It just was so helpful to me. So the learning lesson for me is just, we all have these gifts that we're out here able to share and can learn from others. And the second thing I learned, TJ, is I need to do your meditation and record you every time I do something, because it's just so calming to start things out that way. So last time I was here was kind of at the beginning of COVID-19, when we were dealing with new terms like shelter in place and the quarantine and masks and social distancing and all those things. And now I was kind of reflecting on that, thinking back, and now we're dealing with this whole bit of polarization and the divide of the riots and this violence going on and this anger. And I think of the world the way it is the term I would use is negative sentiment override. Our world is in a negative sentiment override, which really means, I don't know if you guys relate to this, but it's certainly happening for me, is when we're in a negative sentiment override, things that normally don't bother us, like traffic or waiting in a line, seem to be more irritating. We're more negative. We're more highly agitated or irritated more than we normally would be. Versus when we are in a positive sentiment override, when things are positive in our communities, those little things don't bother us because there's so much positive around us. And so the reason I thought about this topic of empowering ourselves, of exploring the power of belonging, love, and not being enough, is that these are things that we're missing so much right now in the world that we're living in. And when we talk about this idea, which I'm going to share a little bit more about that, but this idea of scarcity culture that we live in, our culture is one where we're never enough. We're not skinny enough, rich enough, smart enough. We're always searching for more and more and more and more and more. And even in this time that the world is so negative, that's even more prevalent. So we're dealing with things like, trying to like grow from the outside in, I say, like we reaching for all this stuff to feel better internally versus growing internally and enjoying the stuff on the outside. So I want to share a lot about Brene Brown's model on scarcity culture and wholehearted living and how we get there. It's something that's really dear to me and that I use a lot with my clients and have grown a lot myself in the use of it. So when we're talking about belonging, I want to really decipher belonging and fitting in, because we are all great fitter-inners. We can go into a group of people and say the right language and fit in, and we can be the PTO mom, and we can be the person at the social, and all these different roles that we have, but it's very different than belonging. Belonging is an internal thing that I'm a part of, I'm not alone. And being accepted for who I am. So we're going to talk a lot more about that piece as we go through this. But when we're talking about scarcity culture as a whole, what we end up doing in scarcity culture is we buy into the myths of vulnerability. And so a lot of people out there think vulnerability is weakness. I can do it alone. I'm going to stay guarded. I don't want to be vulnerable. And it really is the opposite. Vulnerability is courage. Getting out there and sharing ourselves is courage. It's not weakness at all. And vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. And connection is what gives us purpose in our lives. We are connected. If we don't have connection with other people, if we're not vulnerable, we don't have purpose. So for instance, like when I'm connecting with other people, my purpose is through relationships. I'm a partner, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an employer. These are what gives me purpose. So if we lose the tolerance to be vulnerable, we lose connection. And we have to have that in order to function in our lives. And so we have to, in scarcity culture, we have to break through those myths of vulnerability. In scarcity culture, we also tend to armor up. And we use weapons. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Like armor up is kind of the mask we wear. We put on different facades so people don't see me, can't hurt me. And instead of being who we really are, and we use weapons when we feel shame inside, we fight shame by shaming other people. You see this all the time. In fact, I was exposed to this from a few younger clients that I have here. That just kind of blew my mind. I was exposed to another format of social media. And it was really interesting to me and extremely sad to see comments that people post in the social media avenue to each other. Just the most hurtful, sad things that like no purpose of that. And then I think about, the group of our younger teens are getting into a thing called what they call roasting, where they get together and criticize each other as much as they can. And it's a funny thing, but it's not funny. And so I think about, these things of what makes us want to protect ourselves from getting hurt like that. So in scarcity culture, we're guarded up. We're buying into myths and expectations and messages about things that we've heard about ourselves that may not be true. That we tend to think are truth. Maybe we had messages from our youth or from younger days that we carry with us. So we begin to buy into those, we begin to isolate. And we live in this place that doesn't feel so good. And in Brene Brown's model, she talks about this idea of scarcity culture and wholehearted living. And wholehearted living is really a place where we're coming from compassion and engagement and connection with others. We're being self-compassionate with self-compassionate and showing up for other people. We are vulnerable and we're connecting. We're sharing our shame. What we know about shame is that the more we share, it loses its power, because shame is about being alone. We feel alone in that. So when we tell our story to people that we trust, shame loses its power. So in wholehearted living, we're engaging, we're experiencing empathy and self-compassion and challenging those messages and connecting with other people. And so in Brene's work, when she talks about scarcity culture and wholehearted living, She says, she talks about, she had found in her research that the people who live in wholehearted living have a deep sense of love and belonging. And the people in scarcity culture are missing that. So in her research, she looked at what is the difference between the people that have a deep sense of love and belonging and the people that are missing it. And she found one thing, and it's that the people that have a deep sense of love and belonging in themselves believe they're worthy of a sense of belonging. But we can't just say, oh, I'm worthy, I believe it, and feel it. What we know is that knowledge doesn't always transform into action. For instance, we all know that if we're presented with a salad and a piece of cake, we know the right choice, but what do we choose? We all know that going to the gym every day is good for us and exercising, but do we do it? So knowledge doesn't always transfer into action. And so what she found is these people that believe they're worthy of love and belonging, it was due to the daily choices that they're making in their lives. And she created what's called guideposts. So she talks about how the people that believe they're worthy of love and belonging had the vulnerability to let go of things and the courage to cultivate others. And so I'm going to take each of one of these things individually so we can kind of have a takeaway and think about these things. And although they sound somewhat simple, they're really not. It's really, what I advise a lot of my clients to do is take a few at a time and think about them and what they mean to you. Because if we know that we can cultivate these things in our life and believe that we're worthy of love and belonging, what an accomplishment that would be. And so the first one that I want to talk about is having the vulnerability to let go of perfectionism and cultivating authenticity. And what we know about perfectionism is really about what we should be and are supposed to be. It's getting other people's validation. So it's very different than striving for excellence. Perfectionism is all an external audit of who we should be. So it's pleasing others, it's gaining acceptance. Where striving for excellence is if I want to do something good, I want to do it right for me. So moving away from perfectionism and cultivating our authenticity, like who we are. It's who we should be versus who we really are. And knowing that who we really are is enough. And the funny thing about it is whether we buy into that I should and I'm supposed to versus who I am, either way, there's going to be people that just don't like us, and that's okay. So it's kind of this idea of hustling for our worthiness. When we're in perfectionism, we're hustling for our worthiness, trying to get that external validation versus being who we really are. The next one is letting go of what people think and cultivating self-compassion. Again, I always remind myself what other people think about me is not my business. I have zero control of it. It's not even worth my mind power to think about that. And instead of focusing what everybody's thinking about me, which I'll never figure out anyways because I'm not a mind reader, cultivating self-compassion. And I talked about that last time. There is skill to self-compassion. Self-compassion is when I'm doing something wrong or I'm getting down on myself, can I talk to myself the way that I talk to somebody that I love? Can I give myself those messages? And second off, when I get in that space or when I'm feeling things that I feel alone, do I know that there's other people in this world that also feel that way and have experienced those things? So it's this idea of common humanity. And so that's a really big skill in fighting through not being enough. The next one I love a lot, really talking about it, and that is letting go of numbing and powerlessness and cultivating a resilient spirit. And when I talk about that, most people go straight to drugs and alcohol when we talk about numbing and powerlessness, but we all numb with something. Social media, binge watching TV, food, sex, codependency. I mean, the list goes on. And we numb because we feel like whatever pain that we're feeling, we're not going to be able to get rid of. Like we feel powerless over that. And so the idea of cultivating a resilient spirit, that knowing that if I'm in pain, if I'm disappointed, if I'm sad, I'm not going to sit in that for a month. I'm not going to sit in that for a year. I'm not going to cry for a year. I can move out of that. I am a resilient person. And when we're talking about powerless and numbing, it's really good to think about, as we're saying some of these things, obviously we're not going to look at drugs and alcohol as comfort versus numbing, but we are going to look at things like food, TV, social media, relationships, sex as comfort versus numbing. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Like the idea of sitting down and having a bowl of ice cream might be comforting, and eating a gallon is numbing. Watching a movie is comforting, and binge watching a season, 2 seasons of a show is numbing. And so just remembering why we're doing what we're doing, and trusting that we're resilient people. We have resiliency within us. The next guidepost that I want to talk about is scarcity and fear of the dark, letting go of that, and cultivating gratitude. So Brene talks a lot about, if shame is in the driver's seat, fear is the annoying backseat driver. Fear drives our shame. So when we're living in fear, and particularly, that's pretty easy to do in this world that we're living in at the moment. When we're living in fear, we can get lost in that. We can get lost in that negativity. We can get lost in feeling not enough or less than, versus cultivating and being in gratitude, continually moving ourselves back there. Because even in this world that we're in, we have a lot to be grateful for. We have to be grateful where we are right now, having this webinar and having people that are out there doing incredible things, and that are kind and loving and sharing with each other. So there's a million things to be grateful for, instead of living in that place of fear and scare of the dark. The next one is very similar to that, which is letting go of the need for certainty and cultivating intuition and faith. And, you know, it's interesting because I think so much we want to know what's happening next. We see that with clients in a treatment center. We see that with our friends. We see that with ourselves. We're planning out what is happening next. And we want that certainty for security, but really we have no certainty. But we don't know if we're going to drive home tonight and I'm going to get in a car accident. We don't know if somebody we love is going to come down and give us that call, that dreaded call we don't want to hear. But we know through cultivating intuition and faith that if we're doing the next right thing and we have faith, we can mitigate some of those things. Like if I know I'm driving safely and I'm calm, and I'm not having road rage, my chances of getting in an accident might be a little bit less. And having faith in that as well, that intuition and faith. And the next one is letting go of comparison and cultivating creativity. There's a researcher named Kristen Neff that talks about, I love what she says, she talks about comparison being the thief of happiness. And that so resonates with me, because you think about simple things like what we do, like you think you're going to an event and you're looking in the mirror and you get dressed and you like how you look and you like your hair and you like your outfit, and then you go to the event and you start looking around and think, oh, his shoes and watch are nicer than mine. Oh, I should have worn that. I should have done my hair this way. Or maybe we watch somebody pitching a presentation at work and we feel really good about what we're going to do. And we watch someone go before us and think, oh God, I really screwed this up. I messed this one up. And so we steal the joy that's right in front of us when we get into that comparison, instead of really focusing on creativity. Like, there is nobody in the world like me, and there's nobody in the world like you. We all are unique and have character strengths and character defects. And those make us who we are and make us like one of a kind. I mean, it's pretty amazing to think about all the gifts that each of us have that are different, and really honoring that instead of knocking ourselves down, getting into this whole comparison thing. This one always makes me laugh when I talk about it, because I think it is so prominent in our culture. And when people talk about it, it brings a smile to my face because it's so silly. But it's letting go of exhaustion and productivity equaling our self-esteem, and cultivating rest and play. And I find it so interesting in our culture, and we've all heard it. You hear that person's like, oh, I worked a 16-hour day. All I do is work. And it's like we praise those people that they don't have a life, that's something good, that makes you a better person than me because I work 8 hours a day. It's funny how that works, but it's so important for us to, I think, honor our work that we're doing, but also honor rest and play. And when we talk about rest and play, we're talking about hobbies. Like, it's okay to enjoy a nice dinner, or as Vicki was talking about, go on a boat ride on the weekend, or, you know, do a hobby that we love. And it doesn't mean that we're less than because we're not working 80 hours a week. But our culture is set up that way. And the culture that we live in being a scarcity culture, it's like work harder, do this, and then you'll be better. Then you'll be enough. Instead of really honoring that we work hard and we do work, but we also get to rest and play and enjoy our lives. Because I know at the end of the day, in my end of my life, I don't want to say, hey, she worked 80 hours a week for 40 years. You know, that's not what we want said about us. So we really have to think about that, what we're doing and how we're connecting in relationships and giving back on what we're doing for ourselves is really important. The next one I want to talk about is anxiety as a lifestyle versus cultivating calm and stillness. So many of us live in this total state of anxiety in relationships, and you know, anything that we're doing, we get this angst about us. And for sure, and what we do in work and recovery, most people with drugs and alcohol problems have underlying anxiety issues because that's a self-medication for it. And so letting go of that and really cultivating calm and stillness. And when I talk about calm and stillness, we talk about things that really work, like meditation and yoga. But some people find calm and stillness from nature. Some people find it from running. Some people find it from going to the gym. Some people find it from boxing. You know, we're all wired differently. And so really thinking about what is it that gives that to us. Some people are really anxious, need movement and activity versus yoga and meditation. So really we have to experiment and get to know ourselves, what really brings that calm and stillness. The next guidepost is letting go of self-doubt and supposed to, and cultivating meaningful work. So we are all guilty of the to-do list of, I'm supposed to do this, I've got to get this done, all of these things are on here. And when we get to the end of the day and we've left something unchecked, here we go again, like didn't get enough done today, should have been more productive, versus honoring the meaningful work that we actually complete. That is something to honor when we're out doing what we're doing. No matter what that is, honoring that that is meaningful work for all of us. And the last guidepost that she talks about is letting go of cool and control and cultivating laughter, song, and dance. So we can get stuck in this seriousness, in control. We want, as we go back to some of the other things that we just talked about, this need for certainty, this need to know what's happening next, this need for perfectionism. We get in the space of feeling like we want to be serious and in control, and we miss out again on the laughter, song, and dance, which is the fun in our lives. Looking at what we enjoy, what brings us joy. And that is just as important. In fact, it probably allows us to have more meaningful work. When we can actually enjoy the things, the relationships that we have and the connections that we have. And so when you put this all together in a place of looking at the choices that we make every day, what the research tells us is that through these choices, we're more likely to feel wholehearted in the way that we go about our lives, which if we look at that basic definition again, it's feeling like enough, like I belong. And it's not a goal. It's not, being wholehearted is not like, okay, I live in scarcity culture and I'm going to move through these different choices that I make and I'm going to now be wholehearted. It's a daily practice. So some days I may feel really wholehearted and feel like I'm making good choices for myself in a good space. And other days I'm probably going to be in scarcity culture and have those experiences. But if I can cultivate these things and let go of some of these things that cause me to sink into not being enough and scarcity culture and be more wholehearted in what I'm doing and sharing myself and feeling like I'm enough, then I'm on my way to really believing, like we talked about in the beginning, believing I'm worthy of love and belonging. And if we can maintain that more times than not, I think what an awesome world this would be. And so I just think it's such an amazing practice to really think about. The goal is really, in a nutshell, is letting go who we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. Is in a nutshell, that's the model. And I'd encourage you, like, Brene Brown's work has been very powerful for me, as well as Kristen Neff's work that goes along with self-compassion. And I would encourage all of you to take a look at it. And she has some really simple podcasts and TED Talks and books that are really helpful that kind of put this model in perspective to review. So that's it. So I hope that was really helpful to you. I know it's been meaningful work for me, and hopefully that was helpful to you and where you're at today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon. That was fantastic. So at this point, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. So anybody that has questions, panelists, do you guys have any questions or comments while we wait for questions to pile in or anything? Not to put you guys on the spot or anything, but
You're good at that, Jeremy.
I know I do that a lot.
Out. Oh, I just love you, Shannon. I'm super grateful for you bringing some Brene Brown all the time and just what that means. And I love that you bring tangible tools like all the time that we can just go, oh, we had, 30 minutes of Shannon, and I'm leaving with 3 or 4 or 10 tools that can make my life and day better, like right now. I mean, it's amazing that you can do that. And I appreciate how you just come right from your heart and speak right to our heart. And anyway, that's why we love to have you on here. So we'll probably be bothering you again. I'm just saying.
All right. Any questions out there, anybody? Julie says, great talk. Yep, I agree. Marjorie says, thank you. I love Brene Brown and being reminded of the guideposts. We don't need to exhaust ourselves with being perfect. Like that. I like that. Let's see. No questions yet, which is okay. Francis said that was excellent. Thank you. Yamil. Okay, now here's a good question. I'm actually super excited for this question. Why are we so afraid to be vulnerable?
That's a loaded question. Well, my first instinct is that when we talk about being vulnerable, we're opening ourselves up to pain and hurt. And so what we think is by not being vulnerable, we won't be hurt. But what we're doing is we're selecting out of not only being hurt and feeling pain, but we select out of joy, love, connection, and all the gifts of being vulnerable. So I think being vulnerable is a risk. It requires courage. And that's kind of this whole piece of thinking about, like, when we're vulnerable, when we get hurt, we can be resilient. When we're vulnerable, we can be connected, but we're always putting ourselves out there to get hurt when we're vulnerable. And another piece to that that I think about is oftentimes we can get really hurt when we're vulnerable with the wrong people. I think we've all experienced that when we decide when trust has not been fully built. And a lot of us will kind of vomit vulnerability sometimes. Not only, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Like you see people on social media who are telling you very intimate details of their life. Sometimes that can be attention seeking, but other times that can be just somebody that has a story and they're dying to share and they don't have that connection to do it. But when we're vulnerable with people we haven't built trust yet, we often are more likely to open ourselves up to hurt. So Brene uses a really tangible tool to doing that, which is called the marble jars. And I do these in groups a lot where I allow clients to give somebody a marble for something that somebody's done that week to build trust. And so it's really teaching people to understand that trust is built in small increments over time in exchange for vulnerability. So I might share something small with you and give you a marble. And when I see that I can trust you with that, and maybe you share something with me. Next time I might be able to share a little bit more with you, because now that trust is building, and eventually my marble jar will be full and yours will too. And I feel I can be totally vulnerable with you and share my story with you. But when we do that, when trust isn't built, we can get ourselves into trouble. People can use our vulnerability against us. And I think, again, we probably all have experiences of doing that when something's gotten thrown back at us. But the basic to the question is vulnerability is a risk. It's a risk of causing pain and hurt.
Beautiful. Great question, Yamil. Thank you. Well, all right. Let's see. We'll give it another sec for more questions, and just a gentle reminder of the poll that's going on. If you haven't filled out the poll, we would greatly appreciate your feedback, just so that we can plan what lies ahead for the webinar series. That would be awesome. Katrina says, thanks so much. Excellent. You are very welcome. It's one of my colleagues in Australia joining us today from Australia. Pretty cool. Well, I think that we'll go ahead and wrap up, you guys. Not a lot of questions. So, yeah, feel free to email us any questions if you have them, you think of them later when you're driving or something like that. And of course, we recorded this, so it will be available on our Facebook, and we'll do the email blast per usual. And then if we do decide to make any changes with our scheduling or what time or day we do it on, we'll make sure to put it on our Facebook page. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, and also we'll send it out in the email blast so that you can get it there. And then, Shannon, is there a place people could find you, if like your website or anything you want to plug while we're here?
I don't have a website. Nope.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we need to get you a website. We'll talk about that. All right, panelists, any final thoughts before we sign off?
I just want to tell Shannon, thank you. I always get so much, and I was thinking about a question to ask, and I feel like you answered them all. I mean, it was just such great information, and actually something I've battled with in the past. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll also just say thank you so much, Shannon. I so appreciate your energy and all of your incredible tools. I see that there is a question about getting a list of the guideposts someone's asking. So we can also, maybe Jeremy, we can post that on the Facebook page as well.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you and everyone who is with us today.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you,
Thank
panelists. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And yeah, we'll keep you guys posted on upcoming webinars. Until then, just take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be well, and we'll see y'all soon, okay?
Right.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Shannon.
Thanks,
Bye.
Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.
You're the best.
Always.
Bye, guys.
I don't want to leave you.
I know.
right?
Can't we just stay on with Shannon?
Yeah, we can.